The judge laughed when a 14-year-old black girl stood up in court to defend her father. "Sit down," he sneered, "before you embarrass yourself." But what happened next silenced everyone in that courtroom. Because that little girl didn't just speak. She exposed the real criminal, proved her father's innocence, and taught the judge a lesson he'd never forget. This is the unbelievable story of Maya Carter, the teenager who turned a courtroom upside down with nothing but truth and courage. The courtroom was packed that morning, not a single empty seat in sight. The air buzzed with curiosity and judgment. Reporters leaned forward with their pens ready. Cameras clicked like restless insects, and every whisper echoed off the marble walls. At the center of it all sat 14-year-old Maya Carter, small and fragile-looking in her oversized blazer. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the defense table, her eyes darting toward her father and Marcus Carter, a proud mechanic now reduced to the image of a criminal in handcuffs. The bailiff called for silence, but the murmurs continued. Everyone seemed certain of Marcus's guilt. After all, who would believe a poor black man over the word of a respected business owner? Across the room stood Judge Whitaker, a tall, stern figure with a permanent frown etched into his face. He was known for being ruthless, especially toward defendants who dared to speak out of turn. When Maya rose to her feet, clutching a thin folder of papers, his expression turned from boredom to disbelief. "You're not a lawyer," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. A few people in the courtroom chuckled. "This isn't a school debate, young lady. Sit down before you embarrass yourself." The words hit Maya like a slap, but she didn't sit down. Her knees shook, but her eyes stayed locked on the judge. "My father didn't do this," she said quietly, her voice trembling but clear. Judge Whitaker sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Everyone says that, Miss Carter. Let the adults handle this," but Maya didn't move. The cameras caught her every breath, the fear, the courage, the fire that refused to die out. She glanced at her father, whose eyes were full of both pride and sorrow. Marcus whispered, "It's okay, baby. You don't have to," but she cut him off gently. "Yes, I do." The judge rolled his eyes, tapping his gavel impatiently. "Let's get on with this circus," he muttered, and in that single moment, with everyone doubting her, mocking her, dismissing her, Maya made a silent promise to herself. She wouldn't just defend her father's case. She would defend his honor, and she'd make every person in that courtroom regret underestimating her. 3 nights earlier, their peaceful world had shattered without warning. It was just past midnight when flashing red and blue lights flooded through their thin curtains. The sound of boots stomping, the slam of doors, and angry voices shouting commands ripped through the stillness of their small home on the outskirts of Atlanta. "Police, open up!" Before Marcus or Maya could even react, officers stormed inside, shouting orders as they tore through every drawer, every cabinet, every corner. Maya clutched her blanket, terrified, watching strangers destroy the only place that had ever felt safe. Within minutes, one of the officers shouted, "We found it!" They all rushed to the garage, and there, under a tarp, sat several boxes filled with stolen car parts. The labels were scratched off, but the parts were brand new. Maya's heart sank. She had never seen those boxes before. Marcus tried to explain, his voice shaking with confusion. "Those aren't mine. I swear I've never seen them." But no one listened. The officers handcuffed him right there in front of his daughter. "You can explain it to the judge," one of them said coldly. The next morning, Maya sat alone on the courthouse steps, tears streaking her face, clutching her father's wrench, the one he used to fix her bike when she was little. That was when she overheard 2 officers talking about the evidence. "Fingerprints all over those boxes," one said. "Yeah," replied the other, "but most of them belonged to Rick Dalton, his business partner." That single line lit a spark inside her. Rick Dalton, the man who'd been acting strangely for weeks, suddenly avoiding her dad, suddenly too busy to stop by the shop. Something wasn't right. But with no money for a good lawyer and a public defender who barely looked at them twice, Maya realized they were on their own, so she made a decision. Every night after school, she sat at the kitchen table surrounded by old law books from the library, watching online trials, taking notes like her life depended on it. Her teacher said she was wasting time. Her friends stopped calling, but Maya didn't care. The night before the hearing, she held her father's rough hands and whispered, "Dad, I'm going to make them listen. I promise." And for the first time since his arrest, Marcus believed her. Back in court, the air was thick with tension. Every eye was fixed on the prosecutor, a tall, confident man in an expensive suit who spoke with the ease of someone who'd already decided the outcome. He moved from one exhibit to another, showing photos of the garage, the boxes of stolen parts, and written statements from so-called witnesses. This, he declared dramatically, pointing toward Marcus Carter, is a man who betrayed his own business for money. The evidence speaks for itself. Maya clenched her fists under the table. Each word felt like a dagger. Her father sat motionless beside her, eyes downcast, his spirit crushed under the weight of false accusations. When the prosecutor finally sat down, looking smug and satisfied, Judge Whitaker turned toward the defense table. "Does the defense have anything to say?" he asked, already expecting silence. That's when it happened. Maya stood. The sudden scrape of her chair echoed through the silent courtroom. Gasps rippled through the audience as the young girl straightened her small shoulders and looked the judge directly in the eye. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I'd like to represent my father for this part of the hearing." The judge blinked, then chuckled, a cold, dismissive sound. "You're a child," he said, shaking his head. "You can't possibly." But before he could finish, Maya raised her hand. In it, she held a folded piece of paper. Her voice grew steadier. "Actually, Your Honor," she said, "I found a law that allows a defendant's immediate family member to make a defense statement, if legal representation is limited." The courtroom went completely still. Even the prosecutor stopped writing. The reporters leaned forward, eyes wide. The judge frowned, flipping through his rule book, muttering to himself as he searched. After a long pause, he sighed. "Well, the law does allow it," he admitted reluctantly. "In rare circumstances." Maya gave a small nod. "Then I'll proceed." A murmur rippled through the crowd. She walked slowly toward the front of the courtroom, small, nervous, but with every step, her fear melted into purpose. Her heart pounded in her chest, yet her eyes held something unbreakable. At that moment, everyone in that courtroom, even the judge, realized this wasn't just a child standing before them. It was a daughter ready to fight for her father's freedom. Maya's hands trembled as she faced the jury. The silence in the courtroom was heavy, so heavy that even the hum of the lights seemed to fade away. Her voice started soft, barely above a whisper. "My father," she said, glancing at Marcus, "has spent his whole life fixing what's broken. Cars, engines, even toys I used to break as a kid. But the one thing he never broke was the law." Her words lingered in the air. The jury leaned forward. The judge watched her, his earlier smirk replaced by curiosity. As Maya spoke, her confidence grew. She pulled out her first piece of evidence, her father's work logbook, the same one he used every day. "This shows my dad was at home repairing Mrs. Dawson's car at the exact time the theft took place," she explained, pointing to the timestamp. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Next, she lifted another document and the fingerprint report. "These," she said, her tone sharpening, "belong to someone else. Rick Dalton, my father's business partner." Funny how this part of the report wasn't mentioned earlier. The crowd began to murmur. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. Then Maya paused. She took a deep breath, holding up a small USB drive. "And finally," she said, "I have something that will show the truth. Not in words, but in pictures." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." The clerk plugged it in and the screen flickered to life. Grainy security footage from a nearby gas station appeared. The timestamp read 2:14 a.m. The crowd gasped as the video showed Rick Dalton sneaking behind Marcus's garage, unloading boxes from the back of his truck. The same boxes later found during the police raid. The judge's face drained of color. "Young lady," he asked slowly, "where did you get this footage?" Maya stood tall. "I requested it under the Public Records Act," she said. "The police didn't check it, because they assumed my dad was guilty." Even the prosecutor couldn't hide his embarrassment. He lowered his head as whispers filled the courtroom. Moments later, Rick Dalton was called to the stand. Under the pressure of evidence and Maya's unwavering stare, his bravado collapsed. With shaking hands, he confessed everything. He had been stealing parts for months and planted the evidence to save himself. Marcus buried his face in his hands, tears of relief streaming down his cheeks. For the first time in weeks, Maya saw him smile. The truth had finally spoken, and it spoke through her. When the judge finally spoke, the courtroom fell into complete silence. The same man who had mocked Maya hours earlier now looked utterly changed. His voice, once booming and arrogant, had softened, touched by humility. "I owe you an apology, Miss Carter," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "Today you reminded this court that justice isn't about age, status, or color. It's about truth." He paused, glancing at Marcus, who sat with tears welling in his eyes. "All charges against Marcus Carter are dropped." The sound that followed was unlike anything Maya had ever heard. It began as a faint clap, then another, until the entire courtroom erupted in applause. Reporters stood to their feet, cameras flashing in rapid bursts. Even the jury, who had sat stone-faced for hours, smiled proudly at the young girl who had turned a courtroom upside down. Maya didn't care about the applause. She ran straight into her father's arms, hugging him so tightly it was as if she never wanted to let go. Marcus whispered, voice trembling. "You did it, baby. You really did it." "I just told the truth, Dad," she replied softly. Outside, the courthouse steps were swarmed with reporters, microphones, and flashing lights. Everyone wanted a word from the 14-year-old girl who had faced down a judge in a courtroom full of adults. And won. Cameras surrounded her as questions flew from every direction. "How did you find the evidence? Do you want to be a lawyer when you grow up? Were you scared?" Maya smiled shyly and gave just one answer. "I didn't do this to prove anyone wrong," she said. "I did it because my dad taught me never to give up when you're standing for what's right." That single sentence spread like wildfire. The clip was played on every news channel in the country. People online called her the teen lawyer. Universities reached out offering scholarships. Law firms sent letters of praise. And as for Judge Whitaker, the man who once mocked her, he later spoke to a local reporter, his tone filled with respect. "That girl," he said, "taught me more about justice in 10 minutes than I learned in 20 years. From that day forward, Maya Carter's name became more than a headline. It became a symbol of courage, truth, and the power of one brave voice. Years later, Maya Carter became a real attorney, one of the youngest in Georgia. She dedicated her career to defending innocent people who couldn't afford a voice. And every time she walked into a courtroom, she remembered that day, the day she stood up alone in front of a mocking judge and turned the entire case around. Because courage isn't about being fearless. It's about standing up, even when the world tells you to sit down. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful and inspiring stories. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.